So there's a lot of X-Men news that happened this week, including something you probably missed. I'm Nando, IV Movies. I'm a huge X-Men fan. You may have seen my most recent video on the Nando Cut, about who should be the first villain in the MCU X-Men movie. And I mentioned this in the beginning of the video, but 2026 really is the year of the X-Men. And this last week, like these last 7 days, we've learned a lot about the future of the X-Men all over media, so I want to cover it. This is just X news. Also, my cat Mortimer is on my lap. He's excited for this because, like one X-Men who we're going to talk about, he loves to rip at things with his claws. In his case, it's like cardboard. But alright, so let's talk about that first. This week we saw a gameplay trailer for the Insomniac Wolverine game. By the way, this video is not just going to be me going frame by frame trying to figure out exactly which characters are in the video game and predicting all of the story elements. I just want to talk kind of generally about some things I'm excited about. First of all, watching this play out, this reminds me a lot of the Wolverine game that came with X-Men Origins Wolverine, that when people look back and think about it, they're like, alright, that movie wasn't very good, but that video game was solid. Specifically, the lunging and the killing, the damage you seem to take. I know some people mentioned that they thought it was interesting that Wolverine is able to kind of shake off all of the blood, which is a little silly, but the alternative is he's just covered in blood from like minute 1 of a 20-minute mission on. Because it looks like Wolverine's just ripping henchmen in half and there's blood everywhere. So I feel like he doesn't need to reset it, otherwise he's going to look like carnage. We did see some antagonists in this game. One of the big antagonists, it seems like, which makes sense, will be the Reavers. The Reavers are a group of villains in the X-Men universe, and it's funny because they're the jobbers who have already been jobbed. So they have lost fights, which have ended, especially because Wolverine is around so much, in them losing a lot of limbs, and then they have those limbs replaced with robot parts. It's a good way to A, just make these guys look kind of interesting. B, give them different superpowers based on this one has extra legs so he can kick, this one has a shield for an arm. And C, immediately show you, like, these are people that the X-Men have already fought. So you're like, oh, is this guy actually a good guy? Nope, he's not. And we see in the first issue that Wolverine is rescuing some trapped mutants. I will just say, first of all, this costume is great. An absolutely terrific Wolverine costume. I do think we see costumes for like other missions, and there's like pre-order costumes. I'm not convinced that any are better than the John Byrne brown and tan, but I do think the base Wolverine costume, much like the Insomniac Spider-Man costume, is pretty good. We see some other mutants in this trailer that I think are interesting because they tell you a little bit about kind of what this story is. First of all, Wolverine is working with Jean. Like I said, this is 2026, the year of the X-Men. It's the summer of Jean. I think we're going to see that in one of the shows, but also seems like that's going to be a part of a movie that is going to come out this summer. And it looks like this Jean Grey is working with Wolverine. However, we did learn that there is not an X-Men team that exists. Wolverine seems to be working somewhat independently to rescue mutants. So I think that's interesting, especially because a lot of people hoped that this game would lead to an X-Men game, and maybe at the end of the game, you form the X-Men. Like, that actually makes a lot of sense. Cool to see the combo moves with Jean. I think that's going to be very fun. And we do see other mutants that Wolverine is saving. They appear to be the Morlocks. You've got what is clearly a leech, a guy that seems to be Caliban, that same kind of white skin. Then you've got a Callisto. Now, I don't think we know this for a fact, but it certainly seems like she's going to be voiced by Deborah Wilson, who works on so many games. Most people would probably recognize them from Jedi Fallen Order. Marvel fans may recognize them from the Marvel Zombies show that they were a part of. They played one of the survivors, Denise, as well as a member of the Dora Milaje in Eyes of Wakanda. I'll say this, I have seen some people complain because they're like, oh, she's in everything. Now, on one hand, who cares? She's good at her job. On the other hand, I do think it's a little interesting because all the other characters we see in this video game look like pretty one-to-one adaptations of their guy. Like, the Wolverine doesn't look like the voice actor for Wolverine. The Jean doesn't look like the voice actor for Jean. I don't know, maybe it's the Deborah Wilson's contract that, like, the characters need to look like her. I don't know, give her longer hair if she's going to be Callisto. And there's no guarantee she's going to be Callisto, but she has the eye patch, and she's with the rest of the Morlocks, so I feel like that's probably who she is. Also, I know Leech sometimes works differently depending on what medium they're in. Sometimes they can't control their powers. In this, I'd have to assume they can, because it would not be great for Wolverine to be around them. Yeah, this game looks like a lot of fun. We see a bunch of villains. Got Omega Red, Sabretooth, a Sentinel. Mystique is in the game, but it seems like she's also perhaps an ally. And I hope we get some more good guys. I hope we do fill out that side of the X-Men. It doesn't have to be all of them, but I would love to see a Gambit mission. You know, if we have Mystique, maybe we have Rogue or Nightcrawler in the story as well. The Sabretooth model is pretty cool because he's just enormous, and that's something that it doesn't feel like the movies ever fully got right. Like, Tyler Mane and Liev Schreiber were big, but they were not like Sabretooth big, because he's supposed to be like 7 feet tall. And yeah, this game comes out on September 15th, so a couple of months. I think this is going to be one of the big games of the year. It's hard with games this year because they all have to compete with Grand Theft Auto 6, which does seem like it is coming out at the end of this year, although you never know. If that's the case, I hope Wolverine is at least able to own this part of September. I think this is going to be a pretty big hit. It's one of the games that convinced me to get a PlayStation 5. I think that's going to be true for a lot of people. And even though I'm not the biggest fan of Spider-Man 2, I feel like Insomniac has a great hit rate, especially when it comes to adapting storylines that I like. I think the big problem with Spider-Man 2 is I just didn't like Venom very much. But there's a lot of ground that I'm excited to see if they decide to cover here. So that's the first one, and honestly, that may be one of the bigger X-Men things to come out of this year. Like, I do think Doomsday obviously is going to leave quite an impact. And perhaps if another X-Men is in a certain movie that comes out, that'll be a big deal. But like, I could see a world where Wolverine is in the Game of the Year conversation. And if that's true, I think that bodes really well for future X-Men movies. Other X-Men stuff, we got some games. Cyclops is still set to appear in Marvel Rivals. He still looks pretty cool. We don't have much more information about him. And then on the other side, Marvel Tokon showed us some new characters, which include Magneto. So he is going to join the rest of the X-Men that are on the roster: Storm, Wolverine, Magic, and Danger. It is interesting looking at this game because it does tell you something about the priorities of Marvel. This is a game where Doctor Doom has an entire faction, right? He seems to be leading the supervillains. And this is a game that does not appear to have any members of the Fantastic Four in it. I imagine they will show up later as DLC, because they are a big deal, but it is wild looking at what we've got now. Talking about which Marvel characters did not make the game roster, even though Magic and, way more importantly, Danger did. Because Danger is not a character I would expect most fans to know. However, it probably will show up in the other X-Men thing that we saw a lot of in the last week, which is X-Men 97. So two different areas of this I want to talk about. First, there was a new trailer. One thing that was a little interesting, it is not the leaked trailer that we saw a little bit of. It's something else. Focuses a lot on how the X-Men teams are all separated. There are X-Men in the past, there are X-Men in the future, and then there are X-Men in the present who seem to be trying to fill in for the time-displaced X-Men. Well, there are other X-Men in the present that are trying to find the X-Men from the other timelines. It's difficult to say at this point, because if you look at the advertising for Season 1, very little of the advertising for Season 1 focused on things outside the first 3 episodes. And that was what I think made the show really special. So much of it was a surprise. It caught people off guard. And I wonder if that's the case here. I do think this trailer would suggest certain storylines that are going to be like what we're dealing with. And the main through line is Apocalypse is going to be a big part of the future and past stories, as well as some sort of present story. Not incredibly surprising, but I'm wondering if, much like last season, that's kind of obscuring another villain or another storyline that's going to be the real problem. And I think you can see bits of another storyline forming that might be interesting. I will say a lot of analyzing this trailer comes down to which characters are in which costumes, because it seems like, and this is something we've seen in a lot of the marketing, there are quite a few different teams of X-Men that are going to exist. Obviously, there's the past, present, and future ones, but after that, it seems like some of them are going to create X-Corp, other ones are going to create X-Force, X-Factor is going to exist, then characters like Polaris, who are usually on X-Factor, it seems like they're going to join the X-Corps, and none of those account for other characters, like Wolverine and Storm don't appear to be in either of those teams. It seems like Wolverine and Morph are doing their own thing. I don't know what that means for Storm. I doubt they're going to kill her, especially because last season she went through the whole life-death arc of losing her powers. So I'm curious to see where Storm ends up. One thing we didn't get any look at was Gambit as a Horseman of Apocalypse, which is something a lot of people expect is going to happen. You saw a little bit of Gambit's card. Obviously, we know because that was a tease at the end of last season. That was one thing that I think we do know we're going to see we didn't get a look at. We did learn something terrible happened that we didn't even see, which is apparently Illyana Rasputin, a.k.a. Magic, a.k.a. the Queen of Limbo. She is dead, and it makes sense because apparently we're going to find out she died in Genosha, it seems like. And a lot of people seem to die in Genosha, and it doesn't seem like, outside of a couple characters, we really took stock of who lived and died. For instance, like, it seems like Banshee died on Genosha because we saw him get vaporized, although we've never followed up on that. But in this shot, we see Colossus, who we didn't see at all last season, cradling a dead Magic. And then later we see Colossus going up to an altar where Magic's picture is correctly placed front and center. Other mutants we see there, obviously Gambit, Madeline Pryor, the fish guy whose name I can't remember, and then Marrow at the bottom left. That's an interesting one. She is an X-Man who tends to die a lot. And in this shot, we see Colossus in his Acolyte uniform. Now this is interesting because this is a big departure from the comics, but also is very close to the comics. Illyana was not killed during the fall of Genosha, but she was dead around this time in the comics because Illyana was one of a bunch of characters who died from the Legacy virus. Now that seems like that's a storyline we're not going to be really doing anything with here, but it seems like we're going to use Illyana's death here to motivate Colossus to become more extreme and join a team of Acolytes. Now, who are the Acolytes? The Acolytes are a team of mutants who all follow follow one leader, usually have a very specific purpose. They're not about robbing banks like the Brotherhood of Mutants is sometimes. They serve what they believe is a higher function. Many characters have been in charge of the Acolytes. The big three, I would say, although I'm sure there have been others since then. Magneto, Fabian Cortez, a character I do not know if we've ever seen on this show. Obviously not in season 1, but if he was on the original show, I'm not sure. And then the one that we do see a little bit of in this trailer, and I think is a really interesting character to show up for a second, is Exodus. Now, I kind of love Exodus, and I'm kind of hoping that if there is a stealth actual season 2 villain that is not Apocalypse, like maybe they save Apocalypse for season 3 and they really like build up to him. Exodus would be a great villain. I actually talk about Exodus in my villains that should show up in the MCU soon video, but Benet Duparis is a crusader who is one of the strongest telekinetics that's ever existed. I believe he is technically the strongest telekinetic, which is what gives him the distinction of being an Omega level mutant. The aesthetic does get thrown around a lot, and I don't know if that's always been how it's defined, but currently an Omega level mutant means out of all the mutants on Earth, because a lot of them share powers, if you have a certain power, the person with the strongest version of that power is the Omega level. So Magneto, Omega level for magnetism. Storm, Omega level for weather control. And I think Exodus is usually the Omega level for telekinesis. He's fun because he's another character that takes himself very seriously, and he is a character that is powered by belief. So if more people believe in him, he gets stronger. I love that as a way to justify like raising a power level. And we do see him in the trailer fighting Nightcrawler with the sword, which makes sense because he is a crusader. And I think the reason I'm so focused on Exodus here is because this week, the fifth thing that happened in relation to the X-Men is Marvel released the first issue of what seems to be a 3-issue comic series that is X-Men 97 Season 2, the comic. Now, what it seems like this is going to do is bridge seasons 1 and 2. I think that is a great idea. I've been praying Marvel or DC would do something like this. And it does seem like it maybe is easier to do in animation because you do have to figure out what the stories are long in advance as opposed to some of the movies where clearly they rewrite things on the fly and things change. So you can take characters and go, okay, we know where this character is at this point. We know they haven't been doing anything in the past. So where have they been? What have they been up to? You could tell a comic story about that. This book is written by Steve Fox with art by Salva S. Fine, Matt Milla, and VC's Joseph Bino. It's a pretty quick read. It shows us only the characters in the present. I'm not going to just read the comic book to you because then go out and buy it. It's good to support comic book stores. And also I want Marvel to think this is a good idea so they keep doing it. But I will give you some of the broad strokes because those do tell you a lot about where season 2 may start or some of the storylines season 2 may want to adapt. Also, this issue just brings in some characters. I'm like, ooh, we're doing them? That's interesting. We get a little bit of clarification of the mission the Bishop is on. He is going to go get the X-Men, bring them to the present, doing so with Forge's help. And then we see, and I love this, that tensions have kind of boiled over. There are a lot of people that believe after E-Day, from the end of the last season, the X-Men are still a problem, and mutants are still a problem. So at a vigil, that Jubilee and Sunspot are just visiting, a fight breaks out between the Brotherhood of Mutants and just the crowd. And we get the introduction here of X-Factor. Now, X-Factor was on the cartoon show before, so the original X-Men animated series, and it was this team. Even though we know from X-Men 97 that Forge was part of this team, the one character who is usually on this team but is not here is Quicksilver. He's on that version of X-Factor. But here we have Havoc, Polaris, Multiple Man, Wolfsbane, and Strong Guy. I would love to know where Wolfsbane came from in this universe. Did the New Mutants happen? Was she on the same team as Illyana at any point? And then we do learn they're going to retcon Polaris in the show to have been one of the original X-Men. So it makes sense this is her reintroduction. What we learn is X-Factor is the government-run superhero team led by Val Cooper, who I am shocked is not in jail, but also, if we've learned anything from the real world, you can fail up pretty indefinitely. And she's organizing X-Factor to kind of keep the peace, it would seem. And they fight all these other mutants, including Four-Arms, character you don't see too much of, who just is strong and has 4 arms. Pyro, Avalanche, random characters people are probably familiar with. And then a character named Tempo, who can slow down time. Seems like she should be pretty hard to beat, but she's not. Then the other 2 characters that we focus on here that I think are really interesting are Rusty and Skids. These are, I believe, 2 90s X-Men editions. People are probably familiar with Rusty because he is Fire Fist, the character from Deadpool 2, although this version's not very much like that. But what's interesting is by the end of the comics, they get recruited by Exodus, which makes sense because they were acolytes for a while. But you're like, are they good guys? Why would they join with Exodus? Well, it seems like they get arrested by X-Factor because X-Factor is kind of bad. And I love that. Like, some of them may mean well, but like Avalanche calls him a species traitor, and he's not completely out of line. We also get, this is kind of our introduction in this show to Psylocke and Angel, or Archangel as he is now. I'm curious to see where these characters are, because these are characters we saw in the original X-Men cartoon, but we did not see much of in X-Men 97 outside of characters that Morph could morph into. But it seems like they're working with Cable, which makes sense because they're going to be part of the X-Force team, the X-Men team who like goes on Black Ops missions, and they're out here stopping a team of mutants that have only been in like a couple of comics ever, called the Alliance of Evil. And what I would say they're most known for is the mutant Frenzy, who a lot of people do like, who eventually went on to be an Acolyte. So again, we're assembling the Acolytes, but Frenzy was on the Alliance of Evil. The other characters, you got Tower, Stinger, Time Shadow, they don't matter. Wild to see them here. Because even I was like, I know these are characters I'm supposed to recognize, but I had to look them up. Time Shadow does have a cool power though. He's multiple man by way of time, so he can create kind of temporal duplicates of himself. I don't know, he's not a character that really matters. But these guys were originally followers of Apocalypse, so we're working the Apocalypse storylines into things. Which makes me kind of wonder, when I see this bit, oh, are Colossus and the Acolytes going to be Acolytes of Apocalypse? Like, is that what we're going to do instead of Horsemen? People like Colossus, and then maybe Gambit, who's brought back to life. Other characters, maybe Magic. Maybe that's part of the deal. Apocalypse was like, I will resurrect your sister if you work for me. Maybe that's who the Acolytes are following. However, you would think that until the end of this comic, when you see the four main characters who will eventually be Acolytes in the comics, Rusty, Skids, Random, and Tempo, are rescued by Frenzy and another character who I cannot place, who are wearing their classic Acolyte uniforms, and the last page we see Exodus is leading this team, and they are his Acolytes. Now, Exodus is a character that is connected to Apocalypse. However, it is unclear in this version of the story if he is going to be working for Apocalypse or if he's kind of working against Apocalypse, because they do have somewhat complicated relationship. In the comics, Apocalypse is kind of the reason Exodus has his powers, but like Exodus very much does his own thing. And Apocalypse traditionally does have horsemen. That's usually how he organizes his team. Before, usually mind controlled, although not always, I guess, henchmen with some sort of advanced power set, or who either get advanced powers or sometimes are brought back from the dead, which is probably what we're going to get with Gambit. And I would love to see, perhaps that's what we're doing with Magic. Maybe she's going to die here so she could be one of Apocalypse's horsemen. You could also get away with Banshee, who did seem to die in Genosha and was a horseman in the comics. Then the fourth one could be Madeline Pryor, another character that's dead. Maybe we bring Marrow back. Maybe Storm dies over the course of the season and is recruited to be a horseman. I'm not sure, but I love that we have this comic. I can't wait for the other two. It's interesting because we do know the dates for them. This first issue came out on June 3rd. Second issue is coming out July 8th. And that'll be after at least the first season of the show has come out, because we do learn at the end of the trailer it is streaming on July 1st. I assume that means that's maybe 1 or 2 episodes, because that's how they did season 1. I appreciate that, Marvel. Keep doing that. So the second issue will come out after the show started. The third issue is August 12th. That one will come out maybe as the show is like getting close to wrapping up. However, looking at the description of X-Men 97 Season 2 Book 3, it references one of Apocalypse's horsemen. So maybe this will be synced up with the show, which would be incredible. I'm assuming most of the action of this comic is going to lead right into the beginning of the show and won't be covering the same things. Although it's possible, this could be what the first episode is like. If that's the case, I think this would be very interesting. And like I said, looking at the first issue, but now looking at the descriptions for issues 2 and 3, it does seem like this comic is going to focus exclusively on present day X-Men, which could suggest that those aren't the stories that the show is going to be telling, and this is going to bridge that gap. We don't know. These are all things that have come out within a week of each other. In 2026, the year of the X-Men, I will give more updates as more X-Men stuff shows up. I'm very excited for all of this X content. Reminds me of a video I watched recently about a creator who got their start on the X-Files, and that's Vince Gilligan, part of Captain Midnight's Showrunners series, where he talked about the stories between different people who created iconic television shows. And the story and the method of Vince Gilligan are very interesting. I would love Vince Gilligan to make an X-Men thing, especially based on what I've seen from Pluribus. Like, he gets using science fiction as a way to explore social issues. I think it'd be fantastic. If you want to watch this video and all of my videos early and ad-free, check out this video sponsor, Nebula. Nebula is a subscription streaming platform that I and a bunch of other YouTubers you probably already love helped to create. First thing that's important, all of our videos go up there early and ad-free. So if you want to be the first person to see one of my Nando V movies or Nando Cut videos, Nebula is for you. This video was on Nebula months ago. And then there are series like Jetlag or Tom Scott's England, where they go up on Nebula a week before they go anywhere else. Then we also have Nebula exclusive series of videos, like Tom Nicholas has a series called Slow News Day. Captain Midnight has a series called Showrunners, where he looks at different people that have created television shows. The first episode is about Rod Serling in The Twilight Zone. The second episode is about Vince Gilligan in Breaking Bad. Looks at the journey of how they got to where they were and how that shaped the series they would showrun. And then Curious Archives Gods and Monsters series looks at these different legendary creatures from religion and mythology and talks about how the ideas of those creatures has evolved over time and they've turned into pop culture characters. So you can find all that great stuff exclusively on Nebula. And a year of Nebula is already a steal at $60 a year. That is $5 a month. But if you go to go.nebula.tv/thenandocut, you can get Nebula for just $2.50 a month. That is $30 for the year. It's an awesome deal. Go check it out. I guarantee there is a creator you already love who's part of Nebula. And if you spend some time on Nebula, I bet you'll find your new favorite creator. After me, of course. Your second favorite creator because I'm your favorite. Don't correct me. Again, that is go.nebula.tv/thenandocut. And that's all I got. Stay safe. I'll see you around.